The Paul Leslie Interviews.
It is with great pleasure we welcome singer-songwriter, recording artist, poet, spoken word artist, Mr. Kodac Harrison. Kodac Harrison was named Best Spoken Word Artist, Critics' Choice in 2002, and Reader's Choice in 2003 and 2004 in Atlanta's Creative Loafing. And in 2008, Kodac was named Poet of the Year. Kodac is one of the current Atlanta Slam Masters and hosts the award-winning Java Monkey Speaks. So first of all, welcome Kodac Harrison, and thank you so much for making the time to do this and traveling up here to do this interview, spoken word, and acoustic performance.
It's a pleasure to be here. I think you got it right when you said podunk. I realized it was a little tongue twister there. Thank you. It's glad to be here. It's good to be here. I'm glad to be here.
My first question, who is Kodac Harrison?
Who is Kodac Harrison? Don't start off by asking me a heavy question now that I could go anywhere with that. Kodac Harrison is an artist. I always wanted to be an artist, but I never believed I could be an artist because I grew up in a small town. And you folks got to realize, I'm a little bit up in age. I've been around for a while, and it was a little different when I was growing up. Everybody didn't play a guitar, and everybody, there wasn't cable, there wasn't internet, there wasn't even FM radio. So we thought that you had to be from L.A., New York, London, or maybe Nashville before you could do anything like that. And I'm talking about a performing artist or any type of artist, really. So I'd like to say I'm an artist, and I get involved in a lot of different things. You mentioned spoken word and poetry, which I've been doing much more recently. Originally, I started out thinking I'd be a guitarist, but you have to have an open mind as an artist. You commit to being a life of an artist, at least in my perspective. And you open your mind up to doing different things. So I started out thinking I'd be a guitar player. That's the least of my talents. And I started writing songs, singing those songs I wrote. So next thing you know, I was a singer, a performer, putting together bands, making recordings. Critics call me a poet. I was like, I'm not a poet, I'm a songwriter. And that led to spoken word, poetry, and most recently I had an art opening, and since April I've sold 5 paintings. So, it's just a kind of an open-minded attitude as an artist.
Well, for this State of the Artist report, I think most stories are best from the beginning. So tell us about your early days in Jackson, Georgia.
I like to say I grew up slowly in Jackson, Georgia. In fact, I did. I lived in the same house for the first 18 years of my life. The only bump in the road, so to speak, was when my father died when I was the age 9. And, of course, that was a big bump. And I think, basically, I'm an artist because of that. I lived in a very small town with a very religious family background, and it was very traditional. We didn't talk a lot, especially emotional things. Men didn't talk about emotion. There were no men in my house to talk about anything with anyway. And I needed an outlet for my emotions. And when I was a young boy, I went to Macon, Georgia, to see an Otis Redding concert. I was one of maybe 10% of the audience that was white. We went right down front. We had no problem with that, but we noticed that all the other white people sat up in the third balcony. And so for the remaining concerts that I went to that summer, which were headlined by James Brown and Wilson Pickett, we sat up there with the other white people. But we were right down front for Otis, and that probably changed my life. I don't know that I knew it at the time, but that was the outlet for the emotion, for my emotions that I was looking for. And I was really drawn to Southern soul and to blues and very emotional music in the early days.
What types of music did you hear around the house growing up?
Very little. I went to church all the time. We were a very conservative religious family, and I was at church. I think I went to church 12 years in a row without missing Sunday school. We'd go on vacation, and they would push me down in the basement with a bunch of kids I didn't know to go to Sunday school on vacation, and I always dreaded those situations. But it also tells you that I was a fairly healthy kid. I was able to make Sunday school most of the time, all the time, for 12 years. So it was church music. I remember when I first heard what I thought was the first rock and roll I heard. Some other kids and I, we snuck out on a hill overlooking a black revival on the outskirts of town. And once again, it was a segregated society when I grew up. I'm 60 years old now. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. I just turned 60 in April. And I'm proud to be still here and still doing it and still making music and doing things as an artist. But it was a different world in those days. But we sat outside overlooking a revival, a black revival, and they had bass and drums and electric guitar. And wow, that was rock and roll. And there's no doubt in my mind that that was the first rock and roll I experienced. But, you know, we listened to Perry Como and Lawrence Welk, and you know, later on it was Ed Sullivan. I saw the Beatles, Stones on TV. I don't remember seeing Elvis. I wasn't quite old enough at that point. I'm more of a 60s generation than a 50s, so I didn't see Elvis, etc. In fact, when I saw Elvis, he was wearing jumpsuits and playing Vegas, and I wasn't very attracted to that at all. And it was the Stones and somewhat the Beatles and other English rock and roll groups that I later listened to that led me to American blues and R&B. I remember I bought my first record, and we came to Atlanta to go shopping. You know, there was no, you had to come to Atlanta to go to Rich's or Davison's at Christmas or something. And we were up here, and I bought my first record, which was a Rolling Stones record, Out of Our Heads. It had the Satisfaction on it. It also had That's How Strong My Love Is, a great Otis song. And I hid it from my friends because I thought they would make fun of me, because at that time only girls listened to music, because in the early 60s it was all the Bobbies, Bobby Darin, Bobby V, Bobby this, Bobby that. So it was not macho, only girls listened to music. And but I bought that album and I hid it from my friends, and because they came over and found it, and they were going like, wow, that's great. And so then I was all proud of it. Oh yeah, I bought it, but I also danced, something that guys didn't do in my small town. But it was my way of talking to women. I was terribly shy and couldn't talk to women, but I could ask them to dance. And as a result, older girls in my high school would ask me to take them to Griffin to the WQXI dances. We didn't have any dances in Jackson. Of course, once they got there, they went off looking for the Griffin boys, but I could tell all my friends I went out with this senior, and they were going, you went out with her? And I'd say, oh, yeah. Just because I could dance, And so it doesn't sound rebellious to people of today's time, but buying a record or dancing was pretty rebellious when I was growing up in a small town in Jackson, Georgia.
Fascinating. Tell us about the experience of your first concert that you went and saw.
Like I said, I went to see Otis Redding. I went with some older kids, not that much older. I don't want to make it sound like I was 10 years old or something. But down to Macon, and they said, we want to go see Otis. And I knew because I bought this Stones record. And I researched all those songs. And of course, you didn't have the internet to research, but, I would read all the liner notes, et cetera, and find, and of course, there were no record stores in Jackson either. But somehow, I knew about Otis from the Rolling Stones. And so, and they said, we're going to go down. You want to go? I said, sure. And I knew that, I wasn't going to ask my mother to go. It was a beautiful experience. Like I said, the majority of the audience was African American. We went right down front. Stage was not huge. We were right on stage, and the only problem we had was these big mamas trying to get to Otis, and they would kind of envelop us as they were going on stage. And these were pretty wild concerts, in a sense. Wild in a sense that the floor was open and everybody was dancing. This is think of '60s soul and people dancing. The white folks were sitting up in the top battle, just sitting there, but people on the floor were dancing, and we were right there in the middle of them. And it was a life-changing experience.
When did you start to fancy yourself as an artist?
It took me a while. I had learned a few chords because I wanted to join this band. I wanted to play drums. Of course, doesn't every kid want to play drums? I don't know. I wanted to play drums, and my mother was not going to buy me a drum set, and I don't know where I would have practiced anyway. But so she bought me a little $50 Harmony guitar, and I didn't realize in those days that you could take a guitar and make it playable. So it was extremely hard to play, but I learned a few chords. I was an athlete in high school. Even though I loved music, I was more an athlete. But this is a small-time high school, so I wasn't big enough, fast enough to actually go play at a college, especially one like Georgia Tech, where I was a big Georgia Tech fan, and I got a scholarship to Georgia Tech based on academics in need, predicated on the fact that I major in textiles. Jackson was a big textile town at that time with a bunch of cotton mills and things. That's not the case anymore. In fact, it's now declared part of Metro Atlanta. But in those days, the industry was textiles. And so I got a scholarship sponsored by a local textile mill, and they offered a scholarship, and I won the scholarship, and that took me to Georgia Tech. So, and then I quit playing music for 3 years. But I enjoyed music and listened to music and went to concerts and bought records like crazy. And finally, as a senior at Tech, I was in a fraternity for a little while, and I was the social chairman of that fraternity. I booked the bands. And then I left the fraternity because I didn't really agree with all the things that fraternity is about. After I left the fraternity, I started playing guitar as a senior at Tech. That was a little late to try to think I could do anything with it. So then I went to graduate school. I said earlier, my father died when I was young. My mother remarried after 10 years while I was in college, and my stepfather offered me the opportunity to go to graduate school wherever I wanted to. The alternative was to go to Vietnam. I had a low lottery number, and I took the graduate school option. But he offered me the option of going wherever I wanted to go. He was a World War II veteran. He didn't want me to go to Vietnam, especially at that point in time. So I said, New Orleans. I want to go to New Orleans. I mean, I'd been down there to Mardi Gras. We used to go down there from Atlanta to Mardi Gras every year, and I love New Orleans. And it's just the whole free spirit, and of course, blues and jazz and soul just kind of oozes from the pavement down there. And I was like, I want to go to New Orleans. So it was in New Orleans that I finally got the confidence. And of course, I was playing guitar a little at that time. 3 things happened between my first 2 years there. My first year, I didn't play much music except a little bit by myself, just playing on guitar. I went to concerts continually. I saw the Allman Brothers 2 weeks before Dwayne died. I saw him 5 times before he died. That goes back to that Macon background kind of with Otis and the Allman Brothers. That summer, I bought this guitar that I have in my lap right now. Also, and then that fall, I was given the name of Kodak, and I decided that I was going to be an artist. So I was like reborn in New Orleans. So Kodak was born in New Orleans in 1972, the year I bought my acoustic guitar and the year I was given the name Kodak.
One of the songs on your album, In Search of the Blue Groove, is called Lazy River.
Yes.
And it mentions New Orleans in it.
It is the first song ever copyrighted. After New Orleans, after I graduated from Tulane, with an MBA, by the way, I was thinking I'd get the music business. I thought that's not the way to get the music business unless you want to work in the accounting department. But and I still had 2 years in the Army facing me, and I went to California, and it was in California that I wrote that song. And it was the first song I copyrighted because some guy came up to me, and I was playing a gig at a place called East of Eden in Salinas, California. I'm a huge Steinbeck fan, but I'm getting ahead of myself here. And he wanted to know if he could do that song, and I was like, oh, sure. And I was thinking, boy, I better get it copyrighted. In those days, you had to get somebody to do a lead sheet because I was not musically trained, and it was a little bit more of a process to copyright one song at a time. Now you can fill up a CD or a cassette in years back and just send them in and copyright a bunch of songs under a certain title, and you don't have to have a lead sheet and all that. But yeah, that song is the first song I ever copyrighted, and I recorded it most recently. You're talking about on that song. That album came out in 1999. Well, I also recorded it on my, I think it was on my very first album, which came out in '84. I had the privilege to play it at some of the benefits for the Katrina musicians from New Orleans and whatnot, and that's been a song that's been with me for a while, and I believe one of my better songs.
Can you remember the first song you ever wrote?
Yes, and it was a juvenile song in high school. Like I said, I learned a few chords, wrote this song about, I had this little man that kind of dangled from my car mirror that my girlfriend had gave me, and I wrote this song about the little man because we had broken up, and but it was a horrible song. But I do remember writing that song. Like I said, and it was probably another 3 years before I picked up guitar and continually played when I was a senior in college. But I do remember writing that song. Now, what song do I remember was the first one that I actually kind of felt like was a keeper? Well, Lazy River Blues is certainly one of them. I've gone back in some old notebooks and found some songs that I thought were pretty decent and recorded recently that were early songs that were written. One of them that's on my latest studio CD, Dreams and Nightmares, called Georgia Sunshine. I was doing an interview for Georgia Music Magazine, and they wanted a quote from one of my songs or poems about Georgia, and I was thinking, I don't know. I was looking through notebooks trying to find one, and I found that song, and I thought, that's a pretty interesting song. I think when I wrote it in 75 or whenever, and I was homesick for Georgia, I didn't relate to it so much because it was a fantasy about the future, but then I kind of grew into that song after 30 years. Finding that quote, I wrote some music for it and recorded it. So that Street Corner Band about experiences when I went to play the streets of San Francisco for tips, that was another fantasy. That was one of the earlier songs I wrote. So I would say, some of the earliest songs that are still with me today would be Lazy River Blues, Street Corner Band, Georgia Sunshine.
Would you like to perform one of your early songs?
Why don't I do Georgia Sunshine then?
Oh, that would be great.
Grabbed a dream to California, chased it round and back a time or two, moved up to New York City. It's just something I had to do. Woke up somewhere down in Texas, on the wrong side of a lousy day. But there was a time when my nights didn't seem so cold, and I'd swear that sun shined every day. Do you know I love you, baby? Do you know I loved you, baby? But do you know that I love you? And I thought for a while that I was gonna make it, and that thought took me straight to the clouds. It was just ahead. All I had to do was reach out and take it. Hear the applause, the cheers of the crowd. But somewhere along the way I must have taken a wrong road, 'cause those dreams just don't seem so real anymore. It's just cheap whiskey, smoky barroom, and women that don't know how to close the door. Do you know I loved you, baby? Do you know I loved you, baby? Do you know that I love you? Now I've been sitting here for days trying to clear my mind, but I've been smiling in my dreams. I hadn't done that in such a long, long time, but there's no doubt what it means. Memory takes me to a little town where people care. to the fresh, clean smell of a Georgia pine. And in those memories, I was always happy there. In the loving arms of the one I left behind. Do you know I loved you, baby? Do you know I loved you, baby? Do you know that I love you? Do you know I loved you, baby? Do you know I loved you, baby? Do you know that I love you? That I love you anyway now, any day now. I love you anyway now, any day now, anyway now, any day now. I love you. Just got to get back. I got to get back to my sweet Georgia sunshine. Anyway now, any day now, anyway now, any day now. I love you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to an acoustic performance and interview with Mr. Kodac Harrison. So, Mr. Harrison, you mentioned that you were a solid music fan growing up, and you talked about some of the concerts you went to and some of the musicians that you listened to and some of your musical experiences. When did you make the shift from being a music fan to when you started to look at it as a profession?
Well, like I said, in New Orleans, when I made the commitment to being an artist, and at that point, the only thing I was doing artistically was playing guitar. I had started maybe writing a few songs, but basically just learning guitar. I was really attracted to blues, and I was learning blues. I think that's a basic for rock and roll, in my opinion. But, I still didn't exactly think that I could make a profession out of it, but I was going to try to find some way to be involved in it. And then I kept playing, and of course, I mentioned 2 years in the Army in California. The whole time I was there, it was post-Vietnam, and they were phasing down. I was involved with basic training. They were phasing back, and so I only worked maybe 20, 30 hours a week. And I was in a very disciplined atmosphere, obviously, in the Army. I was running about 6 miles a day and playing, 5 or 6 hours of guitar a day and trying to learn to play guitar. There was a little college there in Monterey called Monterey Peninsula College, and I would go down there every week on Wednesday and play 3 songs. I'm not a person that grew up, as a natural performer who just loved to get in front of people. In fact, I was terrified to get in front of people. And in those days, I'd play those 3 songs, and my hands would be shaking, my throat would get dry, and it was just really a painful experience for me, but it's just something I wanted to do. I love music so much that I was like, I'm going to do this. And then I started, going up to San Francisco and other places to play for tips on the street and stuff. And 2 months after I got out of the Army, I got my first professional gig in a place called East of Eden in Salinas, California. Now, most of my education was very technical, so I wasn't forced to read literature. I read a lot of chemistry, physics, math, business stuff, accounting, economics, blah, blah, blah. But I didn't read literature, so I felt deprived. So I started reading like crazy. And, of course, John Steinbeck, Nobel Prize winner from his book Cannery Row, there was right there in Monterey. He was from Salinas. East of Eden was a famous movie with James Dean in it. And so I started reading John Steinbeck, and to this day, he is my favorite author, Grapes of Wrath, etc., of Mice and Men. You can go on and on. And to think that I had my first professional gig 2 months after I got out of the Army in a place called East of Eden in Salinas, California, I was ecstatic. And I went over there and set up the equipment that afternoon. But yet I was dealing with that nervousness. So I thought, well, I'll just go in right when I'm supposed to play, and I'll walk up there and start playing so I won't sit around and get nervous. I'm just the opposite these days. Even though I was late coming up here because it took me forever to get here, I like to get places early, get comfortable with a situation, make sure there's no problems. So I went in there when it was time to play and there was somebody else playing. There was a double booking. They gave me his gig a week later, and I played there off and on for over a year. But that was like a welcome to the music business. I was reading that Jimmy Buffett book, Pirate Looks at 50, a while back, and kind of a similar situation happened to him. So, I think that's probably something a lot of people go through when they first get in music business, is they run into obstacles like that. And but it was certainly a welcome to the music business experience, and you got to get past those things. But it was pretty shocking at the time. But I did a week later have my very first professional gig where I actually got paid for playing, and the payment was agreed upon ahead of time at a place called East of Eden in Salinas, California.
Tell us about the first time that you made an album or an EP.
I came back from California. I'd actually, had been in the Army. I'd lived out there for 3.5 years. I was a resident of California, had the GI Bill, and I was accepted at Berkeley to go to music school. But I had spent, I don't know how many years of life since I was 4 years old in kindergarten in some kind of, institution, whether it be schools or in the Army. And I was sick of institutions. And even though I wanted to move to San Francisco, I didn't really want to go to school. Even though I didn't know exactly how I was going to live, all I wanted to do was play music, but I didn't know how I could do that. And so I thought, well, this way I can get the GI Bill and I go to Berkeley, and it was very inexpensive to go to school, and maybe I can figure out what's going on. I love San Francisco. And then I got a call from an old friend that wanted me to come and play at his wedding, and he, was whining about it. Another friend from Jackson was living with me at the time there. And he said, if y'all hadn't moved out there, I might not be getting married, I'm going to get alone, that kind of stuff. And we were like, come on, get real. But I came back and sang in his wedding, stayed in Jackson 2 weeks, and moved to West Virginia because a lot of my friends from New Orleans, musician friends, etc., the guy who basically taught me to play guitar, had moved to West Virginia to become part of this artistic kind of communal community. For these people that might hear this, that what the hell is he talking about? It's like a hippie farm, But it cost me $10 a week to live there, and that included food, and I could play my guitar all the time. So there was a period of time when I went back and forth between Atlanta, and I'd come down here. Of course, it cost me more money to live down here, but there was more going on, and I'd go up there, and it didn't cost me anything, and I could play a lot. And I could experience a lot, but there was not a music scene up there, and it was back and forth. And finally decided I needed to move back to Atlanta, and not back to Atlanta. I'd been to school there for 4 years, but to Atlanta for the first time in '79. And I think it was not too long after that, my girlfriend and I moved back to West Virginia. We broke up, and I moved back to Atlanta, and I decided that I needed to record. And I recorded this little EP called Kodak, simply Kodak, in 1981, and put that out. Got a couple little mentions in the Creative Loafing, but that was not the big thing. And then after that, I decided I need to move to New York City I wanted to experience the ultimate American urban experience. And where else are you going to find that about New York City? I had read all about the village scene. Of course, that was over at that time. But I thought, I'm going to New York City. I didn't know a soul. I went up there, and I didn't stay there very long, just a few months. It was a struggle. But I was playing in the village. The guy that was running the thing there at Kenny's Castaways on Bleecker Street said, I like what you're doing. You need to start a band and record an album. Now, the acoustic thing was happening in the 70s, and it started happening again in the 90s, but during the 80s, it was all band. You couldn't get a gig with an acoustic guitar. The Jimmy Buffetts, the Jim Croce's, the James Taylor's, that was a 70s thing. This was 80s. So I thought, well, that sounds good, and I don't know how I would do that in New York City. I don't know so, but I made this little recording when I was in Atlanta. I could go back there. I know musicians there. I can put together a band. I can record an album, so I did. I came back and recorded my first album in 1984, Just a Disguise.
Do any of the songs from that era still find their way in your performances?
Some do. There are a couple that might be appropriate, but yeah, some of those songs, there were, several on that album that I still play often, and I have recorded again to try to get different versions or better recordings or whatnot and on subsequent releases. There was a song on there called Rudy's Restless, and I certainly can't play that one because that's a band song, which is a punk ska song that one time I was in West Virginia, and 3 different bands in Charleston, West Virginia, had learned that song, and I sat in with 3 different bands on one Saturday night singing that song, and, I thought, wow, I've got it made, and people are covering my songs, but that was in Charleston, West Virginia, but that was on that album. And there's some others, Lazy River Blues, which you mentioned, a song called It Must Be Summertime that I still play. There's another one that was a reggae song on there that I sometimes do as a spoken word piece called Slums of the Soul. I don't play that song anymore, but and there are other ones that I haven't touched since then. So I could play one song from that. This is Must Be Summertime. Let me just, I'm sure this is going on the radio, but I just want to tune up here right quick. And I'll give a brief kind of description of how this song came about. When I first moved back to Atlanta, and I was looking around for places to live, and I ended up in Little Five Points, and I said, I've got to live here or somewhere close to here. There was a waitress at the Little Five Points pub, which is the very first place in Atlanta that I played, that it doesn't exist anymore, but there were other people that played their first gig there. I mean, it's debatable whether the Indigo Girls played their first gig there and other people. But anyway, and there was a waitress there that I asked kind of out, and she said maybe. And this song came as a result of that. Waitress down at the corner cafe, and in between the cups of coffee, I proposed we slip away. When it came time for her to make up her mind, tell me what she gonna do. She just said maybe. The girl said maybe. Now there's jazz down in the alley, tomcats on the prowl, bats buzzing streetlights, mama rocks the sleepless child. Me, I'm headed on back to my place with one thing on my mind. What she mean by maybe? What does maybe mean? Out on the street there's a boy and a girl embraced against an old Chevrolet. He swears he'll love her forever. Right now she don't even care. Not tonight. There's love in the air. Not tonight. There's love in the air. The air tonight. take the night off my face. And maybe I just go back down there and ask her. Maybe I'll try a new place. Probably fall in love all over again. You know it happens all the time. What's love anyway? It makes it so hard to hold, but so easy to find. Out on the street there's a boy and a girl braced against an old Chevrolet, and he swears he'll love her forever. But right now she don't even care. Not tonight. There's love in the air. Not tonight. There's love in the air. Must be summertime. Must be summertime. Summertime must be summertime. Summertime, summertime. What you mean by maybe, baby? Maybe summertime, 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 summer sweet summertime. Ooh, in the sweet, sweet, sweet summertime. Maybe this time, oh, I swear it must be summertime.
Great song.
Thank you.
Given the recordings that you were doing, when did you make the shift from doing songs, and then how did you go from that to starting to do spoken poetry?
In the early 80s in Atlanta, critics were calling me a poet. In fact, Russell Shaw, the music editor of Creative Loafing in 1983, called me Atlanta's best poet, musical or otherwise. And that scared the daylights out of me. I didn't know what he was talking about. I hadn't been schooled in poetry. I'd read very little poetry. I read a lot of fiction, but I didn't know. That scared me. But it kind of put a thought in the back of my mind. And other critics started labeling me a poet also. I didn't accept that label at all. Later on in the late 80s, I went to a poetry reading with a friend of mine that I had a lot of respect for, and he invited me to come to this poetry reading over in Emory at the Emory Village, and I went over there, and it just, there wasn't a lot of happening in poetry except for maybe fine art poetry in the, at Emory or Georgia State or something at that time. It just seemed like nobody knew what to do, and nobody was starting. And I said, well, I'll do something, and I just recited a song without music. And that's kind of how it started. And then it grew from there in that, I kept getting these reviews calling me a poet, and I started thinking about it more and more. And then, in 96, we're jumping way ahead, I went to Boston, and I was doing some gigs up there. I needed a place to stay for a couple of nights, and there had been a poet who had stayed at my house in Atlanta, and I called. And I knew him and his wife, both poets. His wife, Patricia Smith, is going to be at the Decatur Book Festival coming up soon at Java Monkey on Sunday night, but Patricia Smith. And she used to be a music reviewer for the paper there in Chicago, and then in Boston she was writing for the Boston Globe. She was also a poet, and so she took me out to these poetry readings that were happening every night somewhere in Boston or Cambridge there. There were 2 or 3 happening every night. I did my first poetry slam there and just kind of experienced. And I came back to Atlanta, and in the next winter, that was in the fall of 96, and in the winter of 97, I put together my first poetry reading in order to try to get Patricia Smith to find out a way to pay traveling poets in Atlanta who weren't going to go to a university. And I started giving poetry readings, and I've done that ever since, including the last 8 years of every Sunday night at Java Monkey in Decatur. Java Monkey Speaks. I've been doing poetry readings there. But it kind of started with critics and putting that seed in my mind and just started thinking about it. And I think the very first time I ever recorded a piece without music was for a bunch of live tapes, cassettes that I put out called the Beatnik Blues tapes, which came out in 94, which I recorded with my band Lucky Street in various different versions. You want me to do that very first piece that I ever did, spoken word? I'd be glad to do that.
Let's hear it.
It was a song on my second album, which came out in 86, called Angel of Mercy, and I converted it because I felt like it was more poetic. It didn't have a lot of rhyme in it. For some reason, I thought at that time that poets didn't rhyme, and that's true. They go through different period, there's different styles and different periods of history when they rhyme and when they don't rhyme, and at that point, all the poets decided they could make music. Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan in the '60s, and they started playing music, and then the poets kind of rebelled against this music thing and started writing poetry that didn't rhyme and wasn't musical, and it's that kind of thing. But anyway, so I chose this piece specifically because I thought it was poetic and it didn't have a lot of rhyme in it. It's called Angel of Mercy. Just the other day, I was sitting in the park watching an old man. He had a smokestack spewing from his lips, a hole in his hat, and nothing at his fingertips, except for the city. And everybody knows that the city can be hard and cold when you ain't got nothing to bribe it with. So he's competing with the pigeons for the crumbs. But then along comes his salvation. She takes him in, puts a little soup in his bowl, a little love in his heart, 'cause she's an angel of mercy. Now, when I got up this morning, I felt like I was in some kind of meat grinder with a bunch of horses and kangaroos and dogs and maybe a few cows. This burger ain't the real thing. It ain't 100%. What's your beef, buddy? But they'll chew you up and spit you out like spent bazooka bubble gum. Somebody come along, step on you, then they grind your ass in the pavement and say, walk on, walk on, walk on, walk on, walk on, walk on down the street. But then along comes your salvation. She takes you in, scrapes you up off the street, puts you on your feet again, 'cause she's an angel of mercy. She's an angel. So that was the first spoken word piece that I did. I recently, Poetry Atlanta, which I'm chairman of, released a DVD, and a performance of that is on the DVD. I wanted to kind of document that. I think maybe I've got better spoken word pieces now, but I felt like in a historical reference, I wanted to do that piece in particular for that reason.
Who would you say your influences are, whether it be poetry or music?
Oh, they've always been the songwriters. Like I said, early on it was the soul singers and the blues musicians, Otis Redding, etc. But later on in the 70s, I got into the songwriters, and I got into the poetic songwriters. I'd already been, I always loved Dylan, but the people that really turned me on were people like Springsteen and Tom Waits. Those writers were very poetic, working class, street, beatnik, bohemian type singer-songwriter poets. Later on, Leonard Cohen, and in the soulful sense, I always loved Van Morrison too. In terms of the songwriters that really seemed to hit for me, it was the more soulful, as well as poetic songwriters, Tom Waits and Bruce Springsteen, even Ricky Lee Jones and people like that.
Well, maybe there's a song from another writer that you'd like to pay tribute to.
I could do that. This is one by Springsteen. It's not one of his well-known songs. and it comes off his album Ghost of Tom Joad, which is referring to the Steinbeck book. Tom Joad was the character in Grapes of Wrath, so I can kind of hit both of those areas. I think that's one of the reasons I like this song, because it comes from that album, and that's the subject matter, and it's not more of his well-known records. I'm not going to try to do Dancing in the Dark for you or anything. So this is called Dry Lightning. Threw my robe on in the morning, watched the ring on the stove turn red, stared hypnotized into a cup of coffee, pulled on my boots, made the bed, screen door hanging off its hinges, kept banging me awake all night. And I looked out the window. The only thing in sight was dry lightning on the horizon line. It's just dry lightning. You on my mind. I chased the heat of her blood like it was a holy grail. Distant beautiful spirit into the evening pale. Her Appaloosa's kicking in, the corral smelling rain. There's a low thunder rolling across the musky plain, and it's just dry lightning on the horizon line. It's just dry lightning. You on my mind. Well, I drive down Alvarado Street, where she danced to make ends meet. And I spend my night over my gin while she talks to her men. Now that big yellow sun comes bringing up the day. She says ain't nobody ever give nobody nothing. They ever really need it anyway. And I get so sick of the fighting, lose my fear of the end, but I can't lose your memory or the sweet smell of your skin. It's just dry lightning on the horizon line. It's just dry lightning. You on my mind. And it's just dry lightning on the horizon. just dry lightning. You on my mind. It's just dry lightning on the horizon line. It's just dry lightning. You on my mind.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to our interview and performance from Kodac Harrison. When somebody listens to one of your records, or when they see you perform, what is it that you hope the listener gets out of the experience?
We're all entertainers to some degree, even though I've never approached it quite like, say, Jimmy Buffett would or somebody. I'm not that sort of an entertainer. I'm more of a artistic. But I hope they get something for it. They're entertained by it, or they makes them think, or there's something. But I want people, when they come out to clubs, of course, it's a different situation. It's more of a party or something. You know, in the past, a lot of bands I had, we've played a lot of bars, and we tried to make people have a good time. But when I'm doing a spoken word performance or on certain CDs, it's more of a artistic experience. What do I want them to get out of it? I hope it moves them in some way, emotionally. And I'm not talking about necessarily making them cry. Maybe it makes them laugh. I don't know. I'd like for it to create some kind of emotional experience for the listener.
Would you say that a shift in your music happened from, if you look at the albums from the 80s and then from what you recorded in the 90s?
Absolutely. I had a major event happen in the late 80s. In fact, I was trying to be a rock star. I was doing the rock and roll thing, had rock and roll bands. I just had a record produced by Brendan O'Brien. In fact, speaking of Springsteen, I think he's done the last 4 Springsteen records or whatever. Anyway, and Brendan is a great musician and a great producer, great engineer, and I was real excited about that record. But the record I had with the deal I had with my record company was not what I thought it was, and let's just say there was some problems there. And then I had this accident, which going into 6.5 hours of surgery, the surgeon said I had 1 in 100 chances of surviving. Told my mother after the surgery that I would not survive. And recently, in conversations with my surgeon, I just celebrated 20 years, he said that I had managed to fully recover and beat 1 in a million odds for full recovery, which are hard for me to grasp. And I've tried to get a grasp of that and try to figure out why I've survived, and I hadn't quite figured that one out. But there are certain things. They got me to Grady. I'm a big supporter of Grady, the best trauma center in the Southeast. Within 15 minutes after the accident, there was some... And the way it got me there so quick was kind of a stroke of luck. We won't get into that so much here, but that was a major life-changing. When I woke up 5 days later after being on life support, and of course I thought I was going to be great, I never realized that I even went through the accident and all that situation. I hadn't heard the doctors saying that I wasn't going to live, and my friends were upset with me because I was taking a little too lightly, and they took me and walked me over to the mirror there at Grady so I could see that I had 30 staples in my head and had gone through this really traumatic situation. But that kind of thing will change you. And I came out of there and I was like, it's not so important to be a rock star or make a lot of money. I just want to be true to myself. I want to be an artist. And I didn't get religion or anything any more than I may have had or had not before then. But it did make me really think about things and realize, what are you doing this for? Why are you in this? What is the reason? What's important to you? And the important thing to me was to be an artist who didn't compromise his artistic goals whether he made lots of money or not. I mean, I have no problem. I'd love to be, a lot more well off than I certainly am. But I really wanted to redefine and made more true to my initial reasons for getting involved in the whole thing. So as a result, I let that record go because I didn't like compromises I was expected to make on the deal for that record, and so that record never came out. Who knows? That may have been the breaking point of my career. It might have been the thing that it might not have made any difference in the world. I might have ended up, if I'd keep approaching things like I was, I might have been dead now. I mean, I almost was anyway. So I came out of that with a different approach, and I went back and thought, what are your roots? My roots were in poetry, poetic lyrics, and acoustic guitar. So I gave up the electric guitar. As a result, I haven't played electric guitar in 20 years. Somebody asked me to sit in my saxophone player, Nick Longo, and his band, and shoved an electric guitar player in my hand, and I'm like, ooh, I'm not comfortable with it. I started out on acoustic, and I decided to go back to my roots and singer-songwriter. At that time, I didn't realize I was going to quite get into the poetry as much as I did, but I was thinking along of being a writer and more my songwriting, my lyrics, and try to. Back in the 80s, the managers I had were trying to get me to take the poetry out of my lyrics because they thought that was over the audience's head, etc., or whatever. I don't know. To me, it seems like a good manager is one that recognizes an artist's strong points and builds on that, doesn't try to change him because you can't make me Springsteen because there's already Springsteen. I mean, you can't make me Tom Waits because there's already Tom Waits. You got to try to find the uniqueness in an artist, and that wasn't happening. So I had a whole different attitude after that, and I decided that it wasn't so important that I be a rock star, and quite frankly, I wanted to get back to my roots, and I started my own little record company out of that. I want to take control of my life now. I realize since then that it's hard you can't do everything. You need the help of others, and I've certainly had a lot of help from a lot of people, but it kind of changed my direction, not so much as it just purified it and took out a lot of the BS, in my opinion, and I refocused on the reason I was doing it and what I wanted to do with it, and so that was a big thing. So when the 90s came around, I was going back more in the acoustic direction, and went over to Decatur, where Eddie was at the trackside, Eddie of Eddie's Attic, and there was an acoustic scene happening there. That's where I met Sean Mullins and Christian Bush and a lot of other people. I already knew the Indigo Girls and Caroline Aiken and other people in the acoustic scene, but and kind of refocused and kind of jumped onto that scene, which I was really that was where my roots were anyway, and that's the way I'd started out. So I kind of moved away from a more of an electric rock scene, and I love the energy and I love Neil Young. I didn't mention Neil Young. I mean, when he starts distorting that guitar, I'm like, wow. I mean, he influenced me for a while there. I was putting the distortion pedal on my acoustic guitar just to try to get a little more crunch and sustain, because I love that kind of stuff. I don't want to be limited into a certain sound or genre, but I'm just more comfortable on acoustic guitar. I'm more comfortable with music that focuses on lyrics, and that's pretty what I feel like is what I do and what my strong points are. And as I become more involved in the poetry scene, next winter I'm going to have the chair over at Georgia Tech, the McEvert chair, which is a revolving chair that changes every year in poetry, which blows my mind. But and then those quotes you were reading way back, as a spoken word artist, a poet and everything. When I started out, I was going to be a guitar player, and like I said earlier, I think that's the least of my talents. I tried to get back, try to rediscover the things that were my strong points and build on those. I want to perform a song that is real important to me, and I want to introduce it with a spoken word piece so I can kind of cover both realms there. I mentioned Otis Redding early on. My major influences, were Otis Redding and Martin Luther King Jr. Otis gave me that soulful background, and I tell people I'm from Jackson, Georgia, which is halfway between Atlanta and Macon, so I feel like my influences are kind of somewhere between Atlanta and Macon. Macon being Otis and the Allman Brothers, that blues, soulful, emotional music, and then more philosophical, more poetic, more spoken word. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Martin Luther King Jr. is the country's best spoken word artist that we've ever had. But anyway, and that shook me up. When I was at Georgia Tech, Well, for instance, I always like to tell this story. It was a really tumultuous time. I went to Georgia Tech my freshman year. Everybody had to be in ROTC. You wore coats and ties to the football game, even if you didn't have a date. 2 years later, we were wearing jeans and T-shirts, even if we had a date to the football games. I mean, it was a tumultuous time. In the meantime, Martin Luther King got assassinated. There was this Vietnam thing that was winding down. It was a very tumultuous time. Musically, it was a wonderful time. I mean, there were some of my heroes, Duane Allman and, of course, Hendrix, and there was just a lot of music going on. It was a wonderful time in that regard, but it was a very tumultuous time. It was you were torn in a lot of directions, and it wasn't a necessarily comfortable time to live through. In retrospect, it seems great, but at the time, we were bombarded with so many things. And so in the death of the assassination of Martin Luther King had a big impression on me at Georgia Tech. That kind of shook me up. And so I guess you could say those two people are the kind of the symbols of my influences of Macon and Atlanta, being born and raised halfway between Macon and Atlanta and Jackson. So I want to do a spoken word piece in tribute to Martin Luther King Jr. and leading into a soulful piece that tributes the soul background as well as other aspects of the word, kind of a study of the word, and about a trip I took down to Macon one time. I had the privilege of performing the song, which is called The Heart of the Soul, in Macon for Mama Louise tribute, which is amazing. And Macon's a pretty conservative town. But at this particular event, which is tribute, sponsored by the Allman Brothers, in tribute to Mama Louise, because she owned a little soul food restaurant right around Capricorn Studios. In the early days, the Allman Brothers would go there to eat. Of course, she's a black woman, and they were white hippie kids, which they weren't so popular in Macon at that time. They weren't, rock stars. They were just starting out. But she would feed them, and even if they didn't have money, she'd say, well, you can pay me later. And she would feed them because she didn't have an ounce of prejudice in her bones. I mean, and they later took her on the road with them. And they asked me to do this piece, that's a spoken word piece that I kind of modified in tribute to her. And I was real pleased because Greg Allman shook my hand and thanked me, and so did Alan Walden. What I loved about it was because this woman who was just had a little restaurant, a little soulful restaurant, brought all these people together. I mean, they were politicians, they were rich people, they were poor people, they were musicians, they were all in a tribute for her. It's a kind of tribute at a fancy, a big banquet room where you would usually be some rich person, I don't know, Woodruff or somebody here in Atlanta. Whereas this was a big tribute for Mama Louise, and I'm getting off on this a little bit, but I do have Macon roots. And so I'm going to do these two pieces, spoken word piece leading into a song, spoken word piece called Where Dreams Become Real, song entitled The Heart of the Soul. And when I traveled to Europe, and I've done 7 tours of Europe, people were not real happy with Americans over the last 10 years or so due to things that were happening in Iraq, etc. I would always tell people that I'm from Georgia, which I'm real proud of because we've had 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners from Georgia, Jimmy Carter and Martin Luther King Jr. And I talk about the soul music that's come from the state, starting with, with James Brown and Otis Redding and et cetera, and I call it the heart of the soul. So I'm going to do this. I don't mean to get too long-winded in this intro here. Once there was a dreamer who dreamed for all mankind, for all the forgotten people, all those left behind. And he carried his dreams from the small towns and the cities to the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And he told us of a day when all mankind would be free at last. But there are those who, out of ignorance and hate, who would destroy the dream. And he was shot down in Memphis around supper time. But the dream did not die. For you can kill the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream. It lives on in that place where dreams become real. In that place, the soul is revealed and dreams become real. 20 years later, I was watching my TV when I saw the dream personified. I saw some kids interviewed down on Auburn Avenue, and I knew the dream was still alive. You could see it written in their faces. You could see it shining from their eyes. You could see it in the way they held themselves, in the way they held their heads up high, the dream's alive. In that place where dreams become real, in that place the soul is revealed and dreams become real. He said, I want to take you where dreams are real. He said, I want to take you where dreams become real, where dreams become real, where dreams are real. He said, I want to take you where dreams become real. Sitting around with a few friends one evening, passing a bottle of Tennessee's Best. We decided to drive down to Macon, see where they laid the big O to rest. By the time we got there, too late to really see anything. But standing in the middle of the Otis Redding Memorial Bridge, we all swore we could hear him sing. You and me, we were the best of friends. Swore we'd be together to the very end. Driving deep down into the heart of the soul, down where the fire burns out of control. You and me, in the heart of the soul. Driving back that night, consumed by a mysterious fire. Each in turn our stories told. Each in turn we bared our souls. Told of all the good times and all the bad. Cried real tears, but we weren't sad. Of all our secrets and all our schemes, of all our fears and all our dreams. You and me, we were the best of friends. Swore we'd be together to the very end. Driving deep down into the heart of the soul, down where the fire burns out of control. You and me, in the heart of the soul. It's just you and me again. And you've come to say goodbye. I don't want the night to end. So I lay my heart on the line for you. And that's not such an easy thing for me to do. But I love you. If you close your eyes, you can feel it. Deep down in your soul, you can feel it. You and me, we were the best of friends. Swore we'd be together to the very end. Diving deep down into the heart of the soul. Down where the fire still burns out of control. You and me. In the heart of the soul. You and me. Burning out of control. I'm burning out of control. I'm burning out of control. In the heart of the soul. In the heart of the soul. In the heart of the soul. We got to get back. Otis sign. Otis sign. Got to, 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 got to get back to the heart of the soul. I'm burning in the heart of the soul. The heart of the soul. We got to get back to the heart of the soul. It's a rainy, rainy night in Georgia. Such a rainy, rainy night in Georgia. And I got to get back to Georgia. I'm gonna take that midnight train to Georgia. 'Cause Papa's got a brand new bag, and I got them Statesboro blues. Do you hear what I say? Do you hear what I say? What I say? What I say? I think I'm losing my religion. I got to get back to that little town in Georgia. Got to get back to that love shack in Georgia. We got to get back to Georgia. To the heart of the soul. The heart of the soul.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to our acoustic performance and interview with Mr. Kodac Harrison. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the album In Search of the Blue Groove.
Okay.
It seems like that album has a lot of horns in it, and it's more of a rock feel than the other albums. I was hoping you could tell us about the influence behind the song Love Turned on the Light.
Love Turned on the Light was written as a result of the accident that I was talking about earlier, and that was a expression about a metaphor for my realization after the accident. Most of my albums since then, like I said, I went back to more of an acoustic approach. However, that particular recording was more of a rock album. For a while there, I had a band in the 90s that were focused on kind of distorted acoustic guitar and electric violin, bass, and drums called the Blue Groove. And then I also put together a 10-piece soul band with a horn section, 3-piece horn section, and 3 female backup singers. And this album took about 4 years to come together, and both of those influences are on that record. And it should have been 2 records probably, but you don't always get to choose those situations. So, there's that rock thing, with the distorted acoustic guitar and the electric violin and the bass and drums, more of a lean, dirty. My voice was pretty rough in those days. I think it's gotten better because they don't allow us smoking in bars, at least not in Decatur as much. So I don't smoke, but, when you're singing, you're breathing a lot and my voice was getting pretty rough at that time. And so I just kind of went with it. But at the same time, I put together a soul band because of my soul influences. So that particular record is more bigger production than some of the records I've done since the 80s. It kind of has those two influences in there. There's the soul band with the horns and all, and then there's the more lean, dirty rock band. But I've also always loved saxophone. I think maybe that was one of the original reasons I was turned on to Springsteen, but I guess it goes to my soul roots, that horn thing. There was always horns in Otis's songs, etc. In fact, he did a lot of the horn arrangements. But so I've always liked saxophone, so there's always a lot of saxophone in my recordings, including that particular one.
And that brings us to one of your more recent recordings, my absolute personal favorite in the Kodac Harrison discography is Portraits and Passages. And
well, thank you.
My favorite song, Sad Soft Music.
Ah, yes. On my very first tour of Europe, I had met a German musician playing in Columbus. I was doing a little trio that was in, since I didn't have another guitar player or whatnot, if I'm playing guitar, blues is the thing I play best if it's just going to focus on me. And usually I try to have another guitar player unless I'm playing solo or something, or at least another instrument. And, but this guy was, he was searching for he was a big, huge blues fan. He was a German musician, and he flew into St. Louis and went down to Mississippi and searched for the home place of Robert Johnson and went to New Orleans and Mississippi. And he was coming, they were hitchhiking, he and another musician friends, and they were in Columbus, Georgia, and they heard us play, and he really liked us. And I kind of kept in touch with him because I was trying to figure out a way to get to Europe. So when I first went to Europe, it was through another friend of mine who was part owner of a French restaurant in Decatur, Café Alsace. So he told me about these great tickets for like $2.99 round trip. This is back in '99. And I was like, wow, I got to take advantage of it. And he said, I can get you a couple of gigs. And I thought, ooh, I'm gone for sure. So I was mainly interested in going to Amsterdam and Paris and spent a couple nights in Amsterdam, 3 nights in Paris, and a couple nights in Strasbourg. And I went into Germany to play one gig that the guy I'd met in Columbus had set up. That turned out to be a great gig. I made contacts there. I played that club 7 times there. I just love those people. The Germans have listened to English music. All them German musicians, all the pop German musicians, sing in English. I guess because of the occupation, they have been listening to English music on radio for 40, 50 years now, at least in former West Germany. And it was just a great gig. I mean, I had lost my CDs in France. They were stolen in the mail or whatever, and people were giving me money to send them CDs, standing ovations. And, and the money I made there was enough to basically pay for the trip. And I made some contacts there that have proved to be valuable. And every tour has included Germany. I've also played in Prague and in the Netherlands, etc. But the musician that I met suffered from a depression. And when I was there, he was just in a real foul mood the whole time. Even though he got me the gig and he gave us a place to stay, I never saw him smile the whole time. And it turns out he suffered from clinical depression. I mean, he had great kids and great situation, I thought. And we got back after the gig and we broke out a little Tennessee's Best in reference. You heard that because he bought one of my CDs and he'd heard that, my label for Jack Daniels in The Heart of the Soul. And he broke out a bottle of Jack Daniels and had a little bit, and I saw him smile for the first time. And because it was late at night, he put on this quiet, kind of arty music and kind of a European sounding stuff. And because he liked a lot of American blues and stuff, and I wrote that song for him, and I wanted it to sound European, so I put the accordion. That's Brandon Bush on the accordion there. You may have seen him night before last on ABC with Sugarland, playing the accordion as well as keyboards. He was my roommate for a while there. Nick Longo, who is my saxophone player, he's got his own band. He plays a lot of people. So I should leave out the word my, but he's played saxophone with me since about 92. and it's been on every recording I've made since then. Played clarinet on that song specifically to try to give it a European song, and I particularly like that. I think it's a very poetic piece, and I'm glad that you like that too.
There's another song on that album that I really like too, Maria's Eyes.
Yeah.
It depresses me a lot, but it's a song I like a lot.
I like it too. It is somewhat a depressing song. And I don't know where that song came from. You know, I have a friend of mine said, you channel that song. And I've had other people, you know, it talks about a young kid who got in a fight with his girlfriend, and he was trying to make it up for him, trying to get some money. So he robs a convenience store and ends up having a car crash. But so it is a depressing song. And people ask me, have you ever robbed a convenience store? I'm like, no, man. You know, my songs are not necessarily from personal experience, even though there's a little bit of me in all these songs. Lazy River Blues, we mentioned earlier. It comes from my living in New Orleans, but I never did have a farm and never got flooded out and never lived in Slidell, etc., or wasn't born in Slidell. So, but this song in particular was something I think I was in West Virginia at the time when I wrote it. I just kind of channeled it. I think it's very poetic. It is a little depressing, but I like that song too. I'm glad you like. In fact, both of those are kind of depressing, but they're both very poetic, and those are the kind of songs that I listen to. I call them late nights alone with my favorite intoxicant. A few of those songs that never fail to touch my soul. They're not songs you play in the morning when you get up. They're late night songs. Maybe you're by yourself. Maybe you're a little bit contemplative, you know, etc. And those are and I really am attracted to those kind of songs, and quite often write those songs, and think they're some of my best songs also, you know.
Those are the kind of songs that I always find myself the most attracted to.
We have a common link there then, because I do too. There's room for all types of artists. You know, there's room for the Jimmy Buffetts, and there's room for the other side of that spectrum too. You know, you're not going to drink margaritas and put on your colorful clothes and listen to songs like that, but sometimes those songs are appropriate, and I am drawn to those myself. Fight. And I was wrong, she was right. But I'm gonna make it up to her. I'm gonna get some cash and take her out. I'm gonna treat her like she deserves to be treated. Put a sparkle in Maria's eyes. My Maria's eyes. My Maria's eyes. Picked out a convenience store. To pick up the cash. It's just my luck the fool pulled a gun. So I shot him in the chest. And he shot me back, and that's when I put him away. And I just made tracks, forgot about the cash. I headed straight for the interstate. Now I got sirens screaming in my ears. I got blood running down my side. But all I can see is my Maria's eyes. My Maria's eyes. I got it on the floor. Full speed ahead. I got to make it through. But I'm starting to see double and things are spinning round. I'm losing control, things are spinning round. Time stands still, things are spinning round. I'm gonna hit that wall, I'm gonna hit that wall, I'm gonna hit that wall. I'm gonna hit that wall, I'm gonna hit that wall, I'm gonna hit that wall. But all I can see, all I can see, all I can see is Mario's eyes, straight into Mario's eyes. I'll be safe in Mario's eyes. I want to make it right in Mario's eyes. My Mario's eyes.
Very good. I understand that you have an interest in publishing a book of some of your poems and lyrics, and that sounds very interesting.
Yes, and I'm compiling one right now. And next year, I'm going to have the endowed chair of poetry over at Georgia Tech. They have two of them over there, and it's the only university in the whole country that has over one. One of them is in a permanent chair that Thomas Lux has, and one of them they revolves every year, and I'm going to have it this year. And I'm hoping to parlay that into some sort of book, which I want to put out of lyrics and poetry that I've written over the years, somewhat of a retrospective, and hoping that that will help me get something of that nature published. But yes, I'm working on that right now, in fact.
Tell us about some of the people that you played with. A lot of our listeners might be familiar with Amy Lee, but there's another sax player.
Amy Lee, who played with Jimmy Buffett for years, and that's where I met Jimmy Buffett. I've mentioned him several times over the course of tonight just because, I have a lot of respect for him. He's a consummate entertainer. He knows his audience, and he provides the soundtrack for that trip that everybody takes once in their life to the islands, and they can go back to his concert every year and drink margaritas and go back to the islands. I respect him a lot for that. He's not a musician that I listen to a lot or feel any kinship in terms of what I do, but I respect that. And she played with him for years and had an opportunity to meet him that way. Nick Longo, who is another saxophone player who has his own band and has played with me a lot, was recently in my theatrical production that I did at 7 Stages, Reach for the Moon. He was a part of that. Another saxophone player, like I said, I love saxophone. Philip Raines has been playing with me since, probably 1980. I've had a lot of great guitar players in my band, from Dan Coy to Barry Richmond. I even did a set at the Attic with John Mayer backing me on guitar for one set. Brandon Bush was my roommate for a while, and he plays with Sugarland now, and also played with Train. And Christian, who is part of the duo with Sugarland, is an old friend of mine and has played on several of my recordings, singing or playing, and is also, I covered a song that he wrote about my accident that's on Portraits and Passages. Sean O'Rourke is a drummer that I played with a lot. Sean played with Sugarland for 14 months. He's played with Mother's Finest. He played with the Aquarium Rescue Unit. The Count Mabutu, who I've been playing with off and on since about 80, also has played with Bruce Hampton. In fact, he's toured with Derek Trucks, and as a result has sat in with the Rolling Stones and Eric Clapton and Santana, and last played with me at the trackside before it burned. Louis Stefanel, who played with great Atlanta soul man Curtis Mayfield. I'm going to leave people out, but Kristen Markinen has sang with me. She's got her own band and is awesome. Some of the people that play in the Mountain Stage Band up in West Virginia has played with me for years. I played with some great musicians in Germany, too. I always go solo, but I played with some good musicians over there. Caroline Aiken has recorded with me. The Indigo Girls, not the whole group, but Emily Sayers backed me on a song on one of my CDs. Tommy Talton, on my first album, played slide guitar, and of course he played with Cowboy and the Greg Allman Band. I could go on, but and working with Rodney Mills, the great engineer-producer. And I've been fortunate to play with some fine musicians in my career and continue to do that to this very day, and can't say enough about them.
Well, that brings us to the present, your most recent studio album, Dreams and Nightmares. That album has two songs at the very beginning that kind of go together. Well, it's a poem that leads into a song, and that's Rubber and Canvas and Run, Rudy, Run. So tell us a little bit about that album, the last album.
Those two pieces in particular, Sean O'Rourke, I mentioned him, the drummer. He also has a little studio and an engineer, and he put together these pieces and gave them to me and said, "Can you do anything with that? Got any words you want to put on that and all?" And I first did just the first section of that, which is I divided it into two sections. It was all one big piece that he'd put together. Rubber and Canvas, I put into the first part of that. It fit right in there. That's a story about me in the hospital in the ICU after my accident. They left my Converses on. I have a certain affinity. I don't have them on tonight, but you can't tell that, so I shouldn't even mention that. I have a real affinity for Converses. I've been wearing them since the very beginning and always wear them when I play. I was wearing them that night, and they had me in there in the ICU with tubes going in and out of every orifice, so to speak, and my Converses on. My mother was terrified by that and horrified by that, and I think took them off. But the nurses got upset because they said they thought I'd be laying there for, who knows how long, and that would keep my feet from collapsing. So I wrote a poem about that, and it fit right in there. And then he said, "Well, you got anything to go over the rest of it?" And I thought, well, I had written this song called Run, Rudy, Run, and had changed the words a little bit, and I kind of really wanted to re-record it with slightly different words. And so I tried that, and I thought, that's pretty good. And I went up to his studio, and I tried two approaches. I tried a more spoken word and a more singing approach, and then we put them together, and there we had a little studio magic, in my opinion. And so that's where that comes from. Sean O'Rourke is responsible for the musical track. He did it at his studio. He put all that together.
Is there a song from Dreams and Nightmares you might want to do?
I will do that spoken word piece from there. I can't do the track that Sean has there, but I can do the spoken word piece, and so maybe we'll just do that. This is called Run, Rudy, Run, which I wrote in encouragement for a friend of mine who was suffering from cancer. He was closest thing to a brother I ever had, lived next door to me growing up, and we were very influential in my career in the early days. I would play my songs to him when I was embarrassed or shy, or to play them for anybody else, and he encouraged me. And anyway, he recently passed on, but I wrote that piece as kind of an encouragement to him and kind of a look back from our early days. I use the word Rudy kind of because I looked at it as a sequel to a song I mentioned that was back on my first recording, Rudy's Restless, when Rudy was just a kid, and Rudy had grown older, so that was one of the reasons I used, his name was not Rudy, but I'll do that piece for you here. When we were young, we were strong and free and determined to stay that way. We'd heard the howling hounds of conformity, and we vowed to keep those dogs at bay. For we knew if we should ever falter, those hounds would tear us apart, deny they'd ever known us, feast on our hearts, on our hearts. Run, Rudy, run. Run, Rudy, run. Now we swore we'd stay ahead of the pack, and we never once looked back. We followed our hearts and the secrets within to those places we'd never been. We lived for the magic, for the living in life, found in the fire, the water, and the wind. We always remained true to our dreams on that road that never ends. Run, Rudy, run. Run, Rudy, run.
Now the dogs of doubt are closing in, yapping at our heels, telling us our dreams will never come true, no matter how strong we feel. But we swore we'd never compromise, we swore we'd never surrender, and we look to the day when we'll finally realize we're more than just pretenders. Run, Rudy, run. Run, Rudy, run. Now there's cancer and there's heart attack, and there's this pain in your back, and you're weak in the knees, and you're sore in the tail, and the dogs of disease are hot on your trail, pounding on your door, crashing on your shore, slowly washing you away, while the winds of time whistle through your mind, and you can't even remember what you were trying to say, what you had to say, what you had to say, what you had to say. Run, Rudy, run. Run, Rudy, run. We swore in the very beginning we'd be in this race to the very end. So don't stop now. Don't quit now. Don't give up now. Run, Rudy, run.
That's the spoken word piece that we do a little bit more elaborately on that particular CD. And then actually my most recent CD is a live CD from Live at Eddie's Attic, which came out this April, called Reach for the Moon, because I did a theatrical production. And talking about being an artist, I started out playing guitar and then started writing songs and singing those songs, and became a band leader and a recording artist. And then I got into poetry and spoken word and then theater. The director at Seven Stages and Little 5 Points, Del Hamilton, approached me about doing something theatrical there. So I put together this production called Reach for the Moon, which we used music, some pre-recorded, some, most of it was live. And we had dancers, and we did little skits kind of within it. I'll tell people, well, it was not a play. It was not a dance performance. It was not a concert. It was a little all those things. We used video and it was a lot of fun. It's not something that I can easily do, but we went to Eddie's Attic and recorded some of the music from it live and released that recently this past April. So that's actually my most recent recording, but it is a live recording. And I think there's a couple of things that have never been recorded before on that piece, including the spoken word piece that I can do for you at some point.
Dear Father, who art in heaven, I've been angry with you for years. I was just 8 years old when you left, but only 4 when you were diagnosed and given only 2 years to live. Cancer had been eating at your insides, keeping you in and out of the hospital those last few years. There's something that's been eating at my insides also. Mother said you tried to disassociate yourself from me, to keep me from getting too attached. I guess I understood. Mother said the last thing you said in the hospital was, I won't be coming home with you this time. You knew your time was running out. Consciously, maybe I understood, but subconsciously I was mad. Now I know I need to forgive you in order to forgive myself. All my friends had fathers, and I wanted one too. I tried to wipe you out of my memory. It was just too painful. I do remember once when you got angry with me for what I thought was no good reason. I didn't understand that the stroke you suffered muddied your thoughts. The only thing I remember of your funeral was the pallbearers bringing your casket down those steep church steps. A rose petal fell from the casket as a tear fell from my eye. I reached down to pick up that detached petal. Disconnected from its flower, it felt so soft, so fragile, and so incomplete. All my friends had fathers, and I wanted one too. Now, I don't know if I really believe in heaven, but I do believe that you're alive down inside of me, helping to shape the person that I am. And now I want to know who you were, so I can better understand who I am. Sometimes I feel so soft, so fragile, so incomplete, so disconnected, so detached. Please, pick me up. Daddy, pick me up.
From Kodac Harrison's live album, Reach for the Moon, that was his performance of his spoken word piece, Dear Father. Now we take you back to our interview with Kodac Harrison here on the Paul Leslie Hour.
I have one little other story that I think is valuable in my career and a song that goes with it. I was asked to play my roommate's wedding back in the 80s, and I played a Springsteen song and a song that I wrote, and then kind of forgot about the song. And then I had my accident and kind of was looking to go back into a more of an acoustic vein. And I remembered that song, and he moved to Columbus, Georgia, and I went down there and got the wedding video out and relearned the song. And I played it in some other weddings. And Chip Carter asked me to do his wedding and told me he trusted me, just play something. You know, I said, well, what do you want me to play? Well, just play something. So I had my young violin player, Daniel Brown, and we went over to the Carter Center for rehearsal. About 3 hours before the wedding. It was officiated by Andrew Young, and of course his dad, President Carter, was there, Rosalind Carter and Carolyn Young and Chip and soon-to-be Becky Carter. We practiced the song to march down on. Daniel had forgotten his bow, so he had to go get his bow, so it was just me. And I played the song. When they got to the altar, I stopped playing it. Carolyn Young came over and said, I like that song. And then President Carter came over and said, was that the whole song? I said, no, I stopped because they got to the altar. He said, well, play me the song. And I played the song, and I was a little nervous playing there for those 6 people. After it got through, he said, I love that song. It's the perfect song for the wedding. I said, but it's too long. He said, well, they'll just have to march in at the end of the wedding. I said, end of the song. So I was like, okay. So 3 hours later, we're there, and Daniel had gotten, we're off to the side. Nobody's paying attention to us. We're playing some music, and then I'm like, I wonder when we're supposed to play this song, because, normally you'd see them and you'd start playing, but they were supposed to march in and towards the end. And about that time, President Carter stood up and said, the wedding will start in 2 minutes. In the meantime, I want everybody to listen to the song. Of course, everybody immediately turned to us, and it was like having President Carter introduce me. And we played the song, and it was wonderful. And later on, I was kidding him. I said, you need to go on the road with us so people will listen to us. And he said, they'll listen to you. Anyway, it's a great song, perfect for the wedding. And Carolyn Young came over and said, well, Andrew Young's having a little birthday party. You want to play? And I said, sure. And I'm thinking backyard barbecue, play songs again. We're over the corner. Nobody's going to pay attention. Turned out it was a big tribute with 1,500 people at the Hyatt downtown, $500 plate. I played for Ray Charles, Hank Aaron, Coretta Scott King, Bill Clinton were all in the audience, and Maya Angelou and Harry Belafonte were hosting the tribute, and they commissioned me to write a song for that. So that song led to all that situation, and so I feel like I had to tell that story because this has been an important song for me, and I'm going to play it for you. Sometimes I feel like when I introduce that song in that manner that I put too much pressure on the song. It's not a very complicated song, and I remember when I first brought it out, the saxophone player I was playing at the time said he thought it was a little too simple for anything we wanted to do, but it's sometimes the simple ones are the best ones. This is called You Took the Loneliness.
There was a full moon. It was love at first sight. When I looked into your eyes, I knew you could feel it too. And I swore when I left you that night I would never leave you again. You took the loneliness. You took the loneliness away. You took the loneliness. You took the loneliness away. Yes, a lonely world we live in. I think most would agree. Sure, there's lots of people, but it's just hard to find someone you can talk to. So if you find that someone, you know you're doing all right. And if you fall in love and they fall too, you know you're downright lucky. And hey, I got lucky when I saw you. You took the loneliness. You took the loneliness away. You took the loneliness. You took the loneliness away. Hey, hey. Hey, hey. You took the loneliness away. Yes, a lonely, lonely world, full of broken hearts and broken dreams. But you know, sometimes it's not as bad as it seems. The clouds disappear, the sky turned blue. The very moment I saw you, you took the loneliness. You took the loneliness away. You took the loneliness. You took the loneliness away. Hey, hey. You took the loneliness. 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 You took the loneliness away. Hey, hey. Hey, hey. You took the loneliness away. Yeah, 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 yeah. You took it away, took it away, took it away, took it away. You took the loneliness away. Yeah, 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 yeah. You took the loneliness away. Took the loneliness. You took the loneliness. You took the loneliness away, yeah, yeah. Ooh, ooh. Yeah, it was a full moon. It's love at first sight. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Ooh. You took it away.
Well, Mr. Harrison, it has been a pleasure doing this interview and hearing this great music from you. So my final question, and then maybe if you'd like to leave with some spoken word or something, anything.
Sounds like a good idea.
This broadcast is going out all over the world. My final question, what would you like to say to all those people that are listening in?
Wow. First of all, thank you for listening in. I hope that something I've had to say or play for you has been entertaining and rewarding and thought-provoking and touched you in some way. I don't mean to be egotistical in that sense that I expect that, but I would like that. Hope everybody finds whatever they're looking for, whether it's an artistic dream or love or whatever. I would like for everybody to have their dreams come true. May your dreams become real. How about a spoken word piece?
That sounds good.
This is called Tied to the Microphone.
Bruce Hampton said it was okay to fail if you're reaching for the impossible. The club owner said you're not blues, and you're not rock, and you're not jazz, and you're not hip-hop. You're not folk, and you're not country. You're not spoken word, and you're not song. You're in between. I said, I like it that way. He said, well, then there's nothing I can do for you. You're tied to the microphone. But I want to find my own way. I want to draw my own map. I want to find my own way. So I'm sneaking down the alleys and I'm crawling through the cracks and I'm running down the canyons trying to find my own way. And I fully expect to be ambushed at any moment because I don't trust either side. And I know tied to the stake, I'm the perfect prey for any predator who comes along. 'Cause I'm tied to the microphone. I'm tied to the microphone. And I had no easy, recognizable early talents. I had to dig down deep to find what I had. I had persistence. I had desire and a little soul. You got to have a little soul. So I let it sing. Now, I know I started too late, and I'm too old, and I'm too ugly, and I'm too this, and I'm too that, and I'm too skinny, and I'm too fat, and I'm too this, and I'm too that, and I'm tied to the microphone. I'm tied to the microphone. But I let my heart sing. I let my heart sing. I got no regret. I let it sing. I let my heart sing. I let my heart sing.